Now, cultural competence is a very important framework because it does help us look at the linkages between working together effectively, an organization becoming more inclusive, and what individuals need in order for them to become part of an inclusive workplace and be people who can be responsible for making it happen at the same time. Cultural competence has 4 different components: awareness, attitude, knowledge, and skills. So I'm going to talk about these 4 components in a minute, but what I want you to keep in mind is that each of these components is highly interconnected and related. And awareness and attitude become the foundation for building knowledge and skills. As important, the same is true at the individual level as it is at the level of the organization. But we can understand what happens at the individual level perhaps more readily. So I'm going to talk about that first, and then I'm going to relate it to organization. You can imagine the individual who is very open and tolerant to cultural differences. Yet they are very unaware of how their own cultural lenses make it difficult for them to be open and tolerant to certain groups of people, like the homeless, for example, or to people who don't speak English, quote unquote, properly. So I'm open and tolerant to different groups of people. But what I'm not aware of is I'm more open and tolerant to people who are more like me. So if I'm low, if I'm low in self-awareness around my own cultural values, but I'm high in my attitude for being open and tolerant to other folks, in terms of my values and beliefs, I think that you shouldn't stereotype. I think that you shouldn't discriminate. I think that you should give people an opportunity at the individual level to show what they can and cannot do. Then I have 2 parts of my cultural competence that are not consistent with each other. I'm high in one, I might be low in the other. To the extent that I get more insight into my own cultural being and who I am and my lenses through which I see the world and how I got them, I'm more likely to become more aware of how people who have different values and beliefs than my own could make trouble for me. And if I'm aware of that, then my values and beliefs can be impacted in a positive way. I can be more open and tolerant. But now they're consistent. Now then I'm able to take on the knowledge and skills needed in order to become consistent in how I treat people around my values and beliefs and my attitude. I can have the right attitude. I can be pretty open and tolerant. I can be pretty aware of my own cultural view of the world. But if I don't have any knowledge of other groups, I won't know exactly how my views of the world are different than somebody else's. So it's very important that we get that foundation and then build up from there. And what happens too often in this work is that we get stuck at the awareness level. We're training for awareness and sensitivity. we're trying to work on our own awareness. What cultural competency does is help us understand that being competent at navigating cultural differences require much more than awareness. So once I have that foundation, I can build up my knowledge and I can build up my skills. Now what we say in the field is, and there's reasonable social science data to support it, is that teaching people skills about how to deal with other folks without helping build up their awareness and their attitude components is like putting a person in the driver's seat of a speeding train. You're going to have a wreck. You're going to have a collision. So most cultural collisions, unfortunately, are a result of people with good intentions, but without a clue about how to pull them off in social interactions. So you're going to have a lot of good intentions, but you still need the knowledge and skills to pull off those good intentions. And you know that they don't have the foundation because they'll start off by saying something like, I hope this doesn't come out right. I hope this comes out the way I intended it. Or I hope this doesn't offend anybody. Because they know they're about to say something that's kind of controversial. And they have good intentions behind it. But they know that they don't have the right knowledge and skills to pull it off. So, but what I like about that is that they're at least trying. But all too often, they mess up and folks roll their eyes before they even finish the sentence, right? And what happens in that is that the dialogue gets shifted from the person's good intentions to what that person actually said and done. So we can have all the good intentions in the world, but if we don't have the knowledge and skills to pull them off, then we're making trouble for ourselves and other people. Now, I liken this to an organization in a similar way. You can say our organization is very inclusive, and you can have a lot of best practices in place. And at the same time, you have a revolving door. You're hiring people because the glitter looks really good. But people find out very quickly that the place does not walk its talk. It isn't as inclusive as it suggests and says that it is. Organizational level, you can come off as though the organization is open and is tolerant. But when the rubber hits the road, the managerial staff, the supervisory staff, the people that you work directly with, do not have the full set of cultural competency components to pull it off to make you feel like you're truly included. Now, this is a powerful framework because it gets around the problem of diversity education that is only addressing the symptoms in the organization instead of the real problems. You have much, much more high-impact diversity education to the extent that you address all the components of cultural competence that lend themselves to either helping people negotiate their differences better, or they lend themselves to creating more trouble for folks in the organization.